Hello, Bendigo.
Hey.
I've had a lovely morning looking at your architecture. Very into architecture. So for those who don't know me, my name is Nicola Charles, and thank you for inviting me to your beautiful city. I am about to share those scary things called truths with you, so if anyone's got a weak heart, we do go into a little bit of property and finance stuff. This might not be the speech for you. So, as was stated, I first came to Australia in the early 90s and I was in my early 20s. And like a lot of people, Australia spoke to me spiritually. I decided then and there that if I could, I would raise my children here if ever I was lucky enough to have some. I admired the people of Australia so much. Am I whistling?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Go.
Those who had chosen to live here among the spiders and the snakes. Because Australians could leave anytime they wanted to. Just as other people like myself choose to come to Australia. Am I holding this in the wrong spot? But Australians don't. Most Australians don't leave, and there's a reason for that. Australia was a lot warmer and a lot sunnier in the 1990s. Do any of you remember that? And it honestly felt like nowhere else on earth. And I remember being advised by an Australian friend. He said, "Be careful in Australia, this place is not England. The politicians are corrupt, the police are corrupt, this place is the Wild West." We'd read in the UK about certain British senior police officers being sent to Australia to clean up Australia's corrupt policing, so I knew that it wasn't empty advice. How ironic would it be if a British woman came to Australia to try and clean up Australian politics? But the politicians surprised me. I wondered why anyone who enjoyed such a pivotal role in Australian democracy, earning a very good living and living in this beautiful sunny place, could ever be tempted to be corrupt. How naive I was. I have quite a unique perspective on Australia. There is a date that I arrived because I wasn't born here, like all immigrants, and for me that date is in the early 90s. It gives me an overview of how much Australia has changed in the last 30 years in particular. If you grew up here, the changes were possibly so gradual that you can't always notice them, and that's likely the case for the majority of Australians. That is also something that the politicians relied on. But I see Australia in the early 90s and now on a graph. And that graph, when displaying public happiness, freedom, financial success and stability, health and trust in politics, heading in only one direction, down. On the political side, without being too inflammatory, based on the things I've learned since just entering or attempting to enter politics, however bad you think it is in Australia, it's actually much, much worse. Many of you have heard Donald Trump say, "Clean up, drain the swamp." Well, in Australia, it is a deep, dark, and very old sewer. So many previously trusted and respected politicians have betrayed the people of this country. Those who paid their wages with taxation and are still paying for these people's pensions. This makes me very upset for Australians. One does not pay to be double-crossed. We've all met and known liars. Some of us were unfortunate enough to once be married to them. It's not a good feeling to know that everything that has ever come out of someone's mouth is a lie. But until the reality of that is accepted, nothing can ever get better. It's the same with politics. I know we all want to believe that there are good politicians out there, but as I've delved deeper into the issues surrounding how things have gone so badly wrong in Australian politics, I struggle to see good public servants anywhere. I will try and explain it to you in the simplest terms possible. I want you to imagine two sports fields next to each other, separated by only a short wire fence. On one field are Australians happily playing soccer by soccer's rules. No touching that ball with your hands. This game is called the Commonwealth of Australia. Just over the fence line in the adjacent field are your politicians, all happily playing rugby by rugby rules. Their game is called the body corporate government. For a long time, as a member of the Great Australian Party and someone who hopes to run for the Australian Federal Senate for Victoria, I've researched and spoken about my outrage that Australia has been running counter to the Commonwealth Constitution 1900 UK, possibly since 1973. I won't school a room of people who likely know about the Royal Styles and Titles Act of 1973, the Queen of Australia Corporation masquerading as the Commonwealth Government, how your politicians swore their oaths to this corporation and not the people of the Commonwealth, and that their Australia Act of 1986 is unlawful as there was no public referendum.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, ex-Senator Lynn Harris. This is all still valid and stands. Yeah. Even their own AI system, ChatGPT, confirmed when we asked it that the Australia Act of 1986 is likely unlawful. However, I recently reached an interesting intersection. While we and our barristers and advisors were busy serving the House of Commons in the UK with paperwork regarding all this, we are seeking something called a mandamus writ, a mandate to fire all politicians in Australia for malfeasance in public office and start again with a real Commonwealth government. I realised that there are two Australias. Two different games being played on those sports fields at the same time, with vastly different rules. We're at the fence line screaming about the Constitution, our rights, democracy, the rule of law, and the Commonwealth. They are our rules, and we want the politicians to play by them. But they cannot, because they are not playing on the soccer field by soccer rules. They're all playing rugby. So why are we all screaming at them about our soccer rules? None of these politicians are playing soccer because none of your politicians are sworn to serve you, the common people, the people of the Commonwealth. They are playing rugby, and their oaths are to the body corporate, the Corporation of Australia. Why is that difference important? Well, because it has engineered a deliberate and cavernous gulf between you, the people, and those you believe are there to serve you. They are not. When Anthony Albanese or Jacinta Allen, or God forbid even Dan Andrews, stand before you in an authoritative manner and demand power and jurisdiction over you, they don't have it. They don't have it. They've never had it. They chose not to have it. They chose. This is why when people cry treason, they will never find that kind of justice. Treason can only be committed if sworn in to serve the people. And this is likely why they never did. This means that they're lying to you when they masquerade authority over you, because they serve only one master, the Australian Government Corporation. It's basically like all of them working for Microsoft. And let's face it, in some cases, they likely are. As Microsoft is behind digital currency, Bill Gates is planning on making money from every single individual transaction Australians ever make. Every single one. And the CEO of Microsoft begins telling Australians what to do. That's a bit confusing, as the CEO of Microsoft is trying to tell Australians what to do. When you go to work every day for a company, you become loyal to that company. The company that drops money into your account every month, correct? When I worked in television, I was working for Grundy Television and then Fremantle Media. Grundy TV would tell us, when interviewed, you must always say, "We are one big happy family of neighbours." Were we? No. but we said it because the company that was paying us told us to. When was the last time you heard something come out of Anthony Albanese's mouth that made sense for Australians?
Never.
When was the last time you heard something come out of Anthony Albanese's mouth that made sense for Microsoft, or BlackRock, or the globalists, or for the corporate government profit? Now you're talking. You see, as the CEO of GovCorp, Anthony Albanese actually isn't doing a bad job. He's destroying farmland by turning it all into energy factories called solar and wind farms. Clever. Another clever deception. Farms produce food. Factories produce energy. So, solar and wind factories are being placed on arable land. Only a certain percentage of Australia is arable land, so why would we cover it in factories? They don't need to put it there, and yet there they are. He's overseeing the purchase of billions of dollars of ballistic missiles. Missiles that we hope will never be used on anybody. Likely to help his friends in the industrial military complex. He's ushering in digital ID, digital currency, and the surveillance state to help his friend Bill Gates gain unelected power over you and make trillions, literally trillions of dollars in carbon fines and green energy taxation. Does that sound like Anthony Albanese is working for you or Microsoft? All without public consultation, all without a referendum. Anthony Albanese, as the CEO of the corporation, knows that that leaves Australia with no actual Commonwealth government, so is now happy to cede power to Brussels and a one world government, because that's easier for them. They're just here to make money, and the one world government will help them do that. A borderless commercial state. The problem being, they are still taking your money as public servants, but serving the public, they are not. And they'll make you swallow the entire bucket of lies using the old Catholic lever of guilt and shame. Because how could you not want to save the planet, and how could you not want to prepare for more pandemics, you selfish asshole? But who is really the selfish asshole? Who is really damaging the environment? If this all sounds impossible and couldn't possibly be true, then look no further than your fraudulently named justice system. Your your common law courts are closed. Your Commonwealth Parliament is closed. I'm not sure how many enormous signals Australians need. This has been republicanism, at least by stealth. Something that is championed even by the likes of sitting Senator Malcolm Roberts. I was once on a live broadcast with Malcolm Roberts when he referenced the Australia Act. Wasn't that long ago, it was on Cafe Lockdown. He said, "We are so lucky in Australia because we're governed by the only constitution that was voted on by the people." No, we're not. And no, they didn't. Just a rudimentary check of Australian referendums would have put that lie to bed for Malcolm. He lied. Why? Because he works for Grundy TV. Sorry, he works for GovCorp. And as for the republicanism by stealth, Australians did vote in a referendum for a republic in 1999 and resoundingly and wisely said no. That result, very much like the Voice to Parliament referendum, is universally being ignored. They tell you that they know how to save the planet from the death of the sun. That may happen in 10,000 years, it may happen in 50,000 years, it may happen in 1 million years' time. These are the very same people who can't get the 10-day forecast right. But let's go back to your justice system. How does that work exactly if the common law courts are closed? Well, that's easy. Your courts are now playing rugby. They are maritime and corporate commercial courts. Civilians often stand before these courts, if they're moderately awake, and state, "I'm conditionally appearing, Your Honour, subject to jurisdiction, as I am clearly not dead, not at sea, and not a corporation." Some bravely cite the Commonwealth Constitution 1900 UK and are swiftly told they are in contempt of court. Why? Because they're not Commonwealth courts. Why does this matter? In a common law court, a person needs to be found guilty beyond reasonable doubt. In a maritime corporate court, a judge only has to believe you are maybe 51% guilty to reach a guilty verdict. Wow. Those rugby rules are vastly different, aren't they? There are literally criminals sitting in jails in Australia right now who have committed less crime than your politicians. It's a sobering thought. Australia is currently rudderless. It is entirely out of jurisdiction with regard to governing its peoples. And more importantly, it's just unfair. We just heard the song, Australia Fair. Well, it's not fair anymore. In the Governance, Performance and Accountability Act of 2013, it displays perfectly the problem. Feel free to look it up. It's called the Governance, Performance and Accountability Act of 2013. Quite a modern act as far as acts go. It states clearly and lawfully that there are two types of Commonwealth government. A, the Commonwealth government that is not a body corporate, and B, the Commonwealth government that is a body corporate. Firstly, and importantly, do you have an A? No, you don't. You don't have a non-corporate Commonwealth government. That ended when they closed your Parliament House in Canberra. There is no new Parliament House. There is only a UN-funded building called Australian Government House. The rugby players call this your Parliament, but it's not. It's the head office of the corporation. And those inside are expected to toe the corporate line. Sadly, this is exactly what they do. All of them, even the good guys. Remember, they are not traitors. I hear people say this a lot. Because they did not sign an oath to you, you just didn't notice. In a very small font underneath the Governance, Performance and Accountability Act of 2013 is a note. And the note states, the body corporate Australian government is legally separate from the Commonwealth. Legally separate from the Commonwealth. Who and what is the Commonwealth? It's you. So it's telling you that your body corporate Commonwealth government is legally separate from you. Quite frankly, they're nothing to do with you. They're as related to you as Microsoft. Why do you think they put that on there? Is it so that the Commonwealth, the UK, the House of Commons and monarchy can absolve themselves of any responsibility for what the Australian Government Corporation does? Again, the King, the Commons in the UK, the Commonwealth is not, was not, can never be held responsible for the harms done to you during their man-made corporate pandemic, because they are legally separate. Again, this is covert and it's deceptive. It's important to note that foreign interference in Australian democracy is still a crime. Under the Criminal Code Act, foreign interference must be linked to a foreign government or its proxy, also known as a foreign actor. Not a foreign actor like me. The foreign actor must be provably covert or deceptive, threatening harm, and making demands with menace to person or persons. Covert or deceptive, threatening harm, and making demands with menace to a person or persons. Sounds very much like what Australians experienced during their engineered COVID, doesn't it? But it's all good because they've made sure they were free to threaten harm, make demands with menace to any person or persons by utilising emergency legislation. I have a vision of a sad little man, probably Bill Gates, sitting there with his AI system and asking it, how could we circumvent those pesky human rights and constitutions? And AI dutifully informed them that only via emergency legislation for a biosecurity threat could they be circumvented. That was a gift to them. Because when you own and store every lethal pathogen known to humankind, you could potentially engineer that threat, though far be it from me to suggest that. My goodness, that's terrorism. It's Remembrance Day tomorrow. Is this what our ancestors died for? Often I've spoken alongside former federal senator for Western Australia Rod Cullerton, the leader of the Great Australian Party, and former federal senator for Queensland Len Harris, who's with us today. Great guy, you should give him a round of applause. Let me tell you, anything good Pauline Hanson ever did, he told her to do it. Senator Cullerton came to my attention when he highlighted the land titles issue being faced by farmers in WA. I interviewed him about it on my podcast. Senator Harris then put together an astonishing PowerPoint during his speeches which described perfectly how the Labour government have had every single Australian's parchment paper title deed to their home and land, rich or poor, farmer or in a townhouse, stamped, destroyed. And they've reallocated everyone with a digital lot number. That was a nice thing to do without asking, wasn't it? People still contact me and say, no, it's all good. Mine's in the safe. And they say, it's okay, mine's with the bank or the solicitor. Yes, your Labour government have instructed all banks and solicitors to stamp them destroyed, and they complied. Because, well, it's the government, but actually it's a lot deeper issue than that. The banks know the game that has thus far been hidden from Australians. I'm just focusing on Australians. I'm not worried about the rest of the world anymore. If you don't believe me that they've cancelled your title deeds, ring your bank, ring your solicitor, and just ask them. At GAP, we believe this is larceny. It's theft and it's the destruction of private property, which is still unlawful. But again, who among the maritime and corporate courts is left to uphold our rights? They are not in the business of human rights. They are in the business of commercial gain. But why? What caused this? The answer is truly shocking. You're going to want to take notes and also do your own research. Okay. In 1973, a momentous year globally, but particularly for Australia, the Royal Styles and Titles Act, the UCC, known globally as the Uniform Commercial Code, began changing. We didn't know, we were busy living our lives. The Uniform Commercial Code is a comprehensive set of laws governing all commercial transactions in the United States and beyond, not under federal law, but state law. They created something called the Banking and Securities Interest Committee. This is why we've all been dragged into commercial law and away from common law. When I tell you what I'm about to tell you, I want you to think about the smug faces, the looks on the likes of Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates, George Soros and co. Because these are the people who've helped distract you while they engineered and lied about this action. In 1973, it was deemed too cumbersome to keep holding paper stock certificates. And so the newly formed committee instructed that all stocks and securities should be held online in trust accounts. They mobilised against this paper crisis, as they called it, and their remedy was titled dematerialisation. The Central Security Depository was formed online, CSD. Their working motto was this: never seek to win by force what can be achieved by deception. At the time, tradable financial instruments were categorised as private property, also called professionally securities, because they made you feel secure. This, however, is no longer the case. I'll give you a simple example. Imagine you purchased a car from an auto dealer for cash. You now believe that you own that car outright, as it is unencumbered by debt. You don't. Not since 1973. Because since that date, the auto dealer has been allowed, under commercial legal law, a new concept that would consider his sold car as remaining his asset. And that dealer was then allowed to borrow money for his own purposes, using the car he sold to you as collateral. This was the first crime that began globalism. Then your auto dealer goes bankrupt. That doesn't do anything to you, you bought your car for cash, right? Understand as well that this is why they're trying to bankrupt everyone. If you know anyone who's going bankrupt, this is why. It helps send the money up the chain. Your car that you own, paid for in cash, can now be seized by certain secured creditors. Globalism is the action of these secured creditors. The UCC have built over decades their own legal certainty and absolute power to take your car or other asset in the event of the bankruptcy of that dealer. This is the horror and simplicity of the lie, and sadly, it's not just cars. Since 2014, when the final legal amendments were established by the UCC, someone else has secretly owned all of our assets as collateral. You already own nothing. Are you happy? Does anyone ever ask when they're buying a home, is this property held as collateral by any secured creditor? No. Nobody advises you to ask that, do they? Because they're all in on the crime. Because the sellers of your homes, your pension funds, and your cars, and your stocks and shares, all secretly gave those assets as collateral before they sold them to you. More importantly, they were allowed to, by a commercial framework now governing this country and all countries in the Five Eyes nations. I realise that this doesn't even seem possible, but this is the ugly truth that your corporate politicians have hidden from you for decades. This is why your Commonwealth has been dissolved. This is why they engineered a pandemic. And this is why, in my belief, that they spent billions of dollars on quarantine centres that never got used. I believe that in reality they are likely new jails for those who could literally go Mad Max when they find out the truth. This is what they've done with all tradable financial instruments. Frontman Klaus Schwab, his promise that you will own nothing and be happy isn't a threat. That's why he looks so smug. It's already happened. It was a surprise attack, and your corporate governments are complying with any request made by their secured creditors so that they can retain power. This is why it appears that your corporate Australian government sold off public assets like Telstra, pocketed the money and didn't share that with Australians. At GAP, we're pushing for what we call our clawback policy to expose these crimes by asking for that money to be shared with all Australians who were alive at the time. Telstra alone was sold for 600 million, despite being worth $2 billion. Where did the money go? It is more likely that Telstra as an asset was seized by secured creditors. Homes, cars, stocks, pensions are now all underpinning the derivatives complex. If you're glazing over, this is not stuff I'm interested in either, but unfortunately, this is stuff we need to wake up to. The same underlying capital has been used over and over and over again. So we are not having our assets threatened by just one secured creditor, but hundreds. The theory they say at the committee is that there is not enough of anything to go around, and that is why they speak of the planet's resources. Come on, it's the World Economic Forum. Do you really think they're talking about anything other than financial resources? The secured creditors are now a hungry gang of bankers, and for some time, unknown to us, they have been demanding access to their clients' assets. Those in the know who have kept their mouths tightly closed so that you wouldn't know or panic call it the implosion of the everything bubble. Not a reset, not climate action to save the planet, not to protect you from COVID, to sweep up all of our assets. There can be no judicial review, none is required, and lawfully none can be sought, because over decades, court documents have already established certainty for what the courts themselves refer to in the documents as the protected class. The secured creditors are a protected class of the rich. We may not know their names or their company names. Even sophisticated investors who were assured that their securities would be protected have found out that they're not. Decades of complicated lawmaking to subvert your private property rights have been underway in secret. Does that sound like good governance to you? Australia was derailed from its constitution to be able to get away with what's happened in the last 4 years. And at GAP, we are seeking a restoration of the Commonwealth to get Australia firmly back on the tracks of the Commonwealth Constitution 1900 UK, because were that to happen, it would protect Australians from the UCC. It's the reason for all of our governments heading headlong into public-private partnerships since the 1990s and selling off or allowing to be seized by secured creditors all of our public assets. And remember, those politicians playing rugby and not Commonwealth soccer are wearing shirts that likely say World Bank. Now, in Labour's misinformation and disinformation bill, it expressly states that there can be no speech that could cause a loss of confidence in the Australian housing market. This is why I'm telling you today. I might not be able to in December. At GAP, we are also seeking for the reprinting and reissuing of Commonwealth passports. You may not know it, you have your passport, you can go to Fiji or Bali or Greece or America, but you are travelling on corporation passports. Your Commonwealth passport would protect you and we're also seeking for those to get reissued. I hope you vote for me for the Federal Senate for Victoria. I might only be one woman, but I want to be the woman that holds up a mirror to these people and makes them face their crimes. Thank you.